Tonight, dear friend, you do not need to carry the full weight of your thoughts. You do not need to untangle every concern before rest can come. You do not need to make perfect sense of the day behind you, or the tomorrow still waiting beyond the dark. For now, you are simply here, and that is enough. Let your breathing slow, just a little. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw relax. Let the muscles around your eyes rest. There is nothing you need to prove in this moment. Nothing you need to fix. Nothing you need to force. You are allowed to be still. Tonight, we will enter a story where God's name is quiet on the page, and yet his care seems to move beneath everything, like a gentle current flowing under deep water. It is the story of Esther, a story of hidden beginnings, a story of preparation, a story of wise waiting, a story of a young woman whose courage did not arrive in a shout, but in stillness, a story where quiet faithfulness, remembered at the right moment, became part of someone else's rescue. And maybe that is especially comforting tonight, because perhaps you know what it feels like when God seems quiet. Not absent exactly, but quiet. When you pray and heaven does not thunder. When you wait and the answer does not come quickly. When you move through ordinary days and wonder whether anything holy could really be unfolding there. The book of Esther speaks tenderly into that feeling, because again and again, it shows that silence is not the same as abandonment. Hiddenness is not the same as neglect. Delay is not the same as denial. And what looks ordinary may still be held inside the careful wisdom of God. So as this story begins, let the noise of the day drift farther away. Imagine evening light softening across ancient stone, palace walls touched by the last gold of dusk, curtains stirring gently in the evening air, footsteps fading down long halls, lamps glowing low, the hush that comes after busy hours. And somewhere in that world of schedules, chambers, waiting rooms, and quiet courtyards, a young woman stands in stillness before God's unfolding purpose, though she cannot yet see it. Her name is Esther, and tonight perhaps her story can help your own heart rest, because the God who worked in her hidden hours is still the God who watches over yours. The God who guided events no one fully understood is still the God who holds the parts of your life that feel unfinished, unanswered, or unclear. So let the story come softly now. No strain, no hurry. Only a gentle journey through Scripture, one calm step at a time. And may your heart rest in the mystery that even when God's name seems unspoken, his providence can still be near. In the days before Esther was known in the palace, before royal robes and polished floors and guarded doors, her life was quieter, more hidden, more ordinary. She did not begin as someone powerful. She did not begin with a voice that reached across an empire. She did not begin at the center of attention. She began, as many lives do, in a smaller place, a place of family memory, a place of daily routines, a place touched by loss, and yet still held by care. Scripture tells us that Esther had also been called Hadassah. It tells us that she had lost her father and mother, and it tells us that Mordecai, her cousin, had taken her as his own daughter. There is tenderness in that small detail. Even before the palace, even before the turning of great events, there is this quiet act of care. A young woman not left entirely alone, a relative who notices her life and gathers her in, a home formed in the aftermath of sorrow. Not the life she would have chosen, perhaps, not the life she would have imagined, but not abandoned either. And that matters, because sometimes the most sacred parts of a story begin with the way someone was gently cared for when life had become difficult. You can almost picture those earlier days. Mordecai, steady and watchful. Esther, growing in grace under ordinary skies. No trumpet announcing her future. No sign hanging over her path, explaining all that God would one day do. Just a life being lived. Meals, conversations, Sabbath memories, daily responsibilities. The kind of days that can seem so small when you are inside them, and yet God so often begins there. Not in spectacle, not in display, but in hidden formation, in homes, in quiet grief, in steady love, in years that feel unremarkable. though they are not unimportant. Perhaps that thought alone can ease someone tonight. Perhaps you have known seasons that felt hidden, not dramatic enough to tell as a story, not visible enough to be celebrated, just long days, repeated duties, private ache, and a hope you are not quite sure how to name. The story of Esther reminds us that hidden years are not empty years. They may be full of preparation we do not yet understand. They may be full of shaping, softening, strengthening, and placing. There are seasons where the soul learns to listen, seasons where patience grows roots, seasons where loss teaches tenderness, seasons where life is being made ready, though the person living it cannot yet tell for what. Esther's early life seems to have been one of those seasons. Then, as the story moves, the world around her grows larger. Royal events unfold far above the ordinary lives of many people. A new queen is to be sought. Young women are gathered into the king's palace. And Esther, too, is taken into that setting, into a space of waiting, preparation, and unfamiliar rhythms. The shift in her life is significant, but the story does not invite us to see her as grasping for greatness. Instead, she is carried into circumstances she did not design, and that too feels true to life. So much of what shapes us comes not through plans we made, but through places we did not expect to stand. Suddenly, Esther is inside a world of polished order, rooms arranged with precision, attendants moving quietly, doors opening and closing according to custom, the scent of oils, the softness of garments, the careful routines of preparation. It is a world far from the simplicity of her earlier life. And yet, even here, God's quiet providence continues. The keeper of the women, Haggai, looks on Esther with favor. This is one of those gentle details in Scripture that can be easy to pass over, but it is worth lingering over at bedtime. Favor arrives quietly. Provision comes without fanfare. Kindness meets her in a place that could have felt cold and impersonal. She is given what she needs. She is attended to. She is helped. Again and again in Esther's story, the Lord's care seems to move in this way, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly opening one small mercy after another. Someone notices, someone helps, a door opens, a need is provided for, a next step appears. And perhaps that is often how God cares for us, too. Not always with sudden explanations, not always with miracles that split the sky, but through the person who offers steadiness, through the timing that keeps something from collapsing, through the exact word we needed, through a place prepared before we knew we would need it, through one mercy and then another. Esther does not seem frantic in this season. She listens. She receives guidance. Scripture says she did not ask for anything beyond what Haggai advised. There is quiet wisdom in that. She is not trying to master every outcome. She is not forcing her own way. She is attentive. There are moments in life when courage looks like action, and there are moments when courage looks like teachability, when strength looks like being willing to be led one small step at a time. Esther's beauty is mentioned in Scripture, yes, but the deeper beauty of this part of her story is her calm receptivity. Her quietness is not emptiness. It is not passivity without thought. It is a kind of steady composure, a willingness to move carefully inside circumstances she did not choose. And for the tired heart listening tonight, that may be deeply comforting, because perhaps you too are in a season you did not plan, a place with unfamiliar rhythms, a chapter where you did not choose the setting, and yet you are asked to keep walking through it with grace. Then Esther becomes a companion for you. She shows that you do not have to know the whole meaning of your season in order to live it faithfully. You do not need to seize control of everything. You can receive the grace that is given for this day, this place, this moment. You can listen, you can breathe, you can take the next right step. Eventually, Esther is brought before the king, and he loves her more than the others. She is set in the place of queen. Even here, it is good to move gently. This is not a scene we need to imagine with bright noise and triumph. Instead, picture something quieter, a life being placed, a door closing behind one chapter, another door opening into one she never could have predicted, a crown resting where no one would once have expected it to rest. And beneath all of that, the hidden wisdom of God arranging what human eyes could not yet fully understand. Esther becomes queen. But the deepest truth is not that she has risen. The deepest truth is that she has been placed, positioned, set at a point in the story where one day her courage will matter for many more people than herself. But she does not know that yet, and neither does anyone else. For now, she simply lives where she has been placed. That is often what Providence feels like while we are inside it. Not like certainty, not like a clear map, more like being gently set in a place whose meaning will only become visible later. And that can be enough for tonight. You do not have to know all that God is doing. It may be enough simply to trust that your life is not random in His hands, that the chapter you are in is not outside His care, that even your hidden years, your uncelebrated faithfulness, your ordinary endurance may be part of something wiser than you can yet see. Take a slow breath here. Let it fill your lungs without hurry. And as you breathe out, let the story settle around you like evening light. Hidden does not mean forgotten. Waiting does not mean wasted. Quiet souls are not weak souls. Sometimes God is preparing a person most deeply in the very season that seems least impressive from the outside. So rest a little in that thought. The Lord who saw Esther in obscurity still sees every hidden corner of your life. The days no one applauded, the tears no one noticed, the prayers that felt unanswered, the simple obediences that seemed to vanish into silence. None of them are lost to Him. None of them. And as Esther's story continues, the hiddenness of Providence begins to show itself in another quiet place, not in a grand hall, not in a feast, but near a gate. Mordecai, who had cared for Esther from her younger years, remains a steady figure in the story. Scripture places him near the king's gate, and that location matters. Gates are in between places, not fully inside the center of power, and not entirely away from it either. A place of watching, a place of hearing things, a place of waiting, a place where ordinary presence can matter more than anyone realizes. Mordecai stays near enough to know how Esther is doing. That small detail carries warmth in it. Even once Esther is in the palace, she is not emotionally erased from the life she came from. Mordecai still cares. He still asks after her welfare. He remains attentive. What a comfort it is when someone keeps watch with love. When someone remembers your story, even after life has changed around you. When success, distance, or circumstance does not sever the thread of faithful care. Maybe you know what it is to long for that kind of steadfastness. Someone who continues to hold your name in their concern. Someone whose care does not disappear when your surroundings change. In Esther's story, Mordecai becomes one of those quiet signs that God's providence often includes human faithfulness. The Lord's hidden care may reach us through ordinary people who remain near, who listen well, and who do not forget us. Then one day, while Mordecai is at the gate, he overhears a plot against the king. Two officers are angry and plan harm. The story does not linger there with noise. Neither will we. Instead, we notice the calm and faithful response. Mordecai learns of danger. He tells Esther. Esther tells the king in Mordecai's name. The matter is investigated. The truth is found, and the event is recorded in the book of Chronicles before the king. Then, outwardly, life seems to move on. This is such an important moment, and yet it passes with so little outward celebration. Mordecai acts faithfully. The danger is addressed. His service is written down. And then the pages close. Nothing seems to happen next. No immediate reward. No great public honor. Just a faithful act quietly preserved in a record. How true that can feel. How many moments in life are like that? A kindness given, a burden carried, a warning spoken, an act of integrity offered, a patient sacrifice made, a long season of showing up for others. And after all of it, no trumpet sounds. No one seems to fully notice. No immediate harvest appears. Only the quiet sense that the deed disappeared into the past. But Esther's story whispers something beautiful here. What is written down is not lost. What is remembered in God's providence does not vanish. The world may move on quickly. People may overlook what mattered. Recognition may delay longer than seems reasonable. And still, a faithful act may be held in reserve for exactly the right moment. There is deep comfort in that. especially for anyone who feels unseen tonight, anyone who has cared for a loved one in hidden exhaustion, anyone who has kept going in honest work without praise, anyone who has held a family together in quiet ways no one else fully understands, anyone who has chosen truth, kindness, patience, or restraint when no reward seemed to come. The God of Esther sees the record others forget. The Lord who works quietly through history is not careless with your obedience. Nothing offered to him in faith is ever wasted. Nothing. For a time, though, the story continues without visible reward for Mordecai, and pressure begins to rise in another way. A man named Haman is elevated in the kingdom, and as tensions unfold, Mordecai does not bow before him. We do not need to sharpen this part into harshness tonight. It is enough to say that pride and resentment begin to move through the story like a cold wind. A plan forms that threatens not just Mordecai, but the Jewish people more broadly. Letters are sent. Confusion spreads. Sorrow touches many hearts. Even within palace walls, Esther becomes aware that something is terribly wrong. The stillness of earlier chapters now carries a deeper ache. And yet, even here, the story does not become frantic. One of the gentlest and strongest things in Esther's journey is that when pressure grows, she does not immediately dissolve into panic. She asks. She listens. She sends word. Mordecai, in turn, sends word back. And eventually his message comes to her with words that have echoed through generations. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? These words are often remembered for their boldness. But tonight, let us hear them softly, not as a shout, not as pressure for performance, but as a sober and sacred whisper. A reminder that a life may carry purpose greater than its own comfort. A reminder that placement is not meaningless. A reminder that the hidden shaping of earlier seasons may be meeting a moment of calling. Imagine Esther receiving those words. Perhaps she had already sensed the weight of them forming in the quiet. Perhaps part of her heart had feared that this moment might come. Now the possibility is spoken aloud. Perhaps this is why you are here. Perhaps what seemed like strange timing was not strange at all. Perhaps hidden years were not empty. Perhaps your place, your story, your preparation, and your grief have all met this hour for reasons beyond what you first knew. It is one thing to speak of providence in the abstract. It is another thing to realize it may require something from you. A step, a risk, a willingness. And Esther feels the seriousness of that. She knows the law. To approach the king unsummoned carries real danger. Even as queen, there are boundaries she cannot ignore. Her position does not remove vulnerability. This matters because courage is often misunderstood. Courage is not the absence of awareness. It is not naive optimism. It is not pretending everything will certainly be easy. Esther understands the cost. She understands the uncertainty. And still, in the quiet place where fear and calling meet, something in her soul becomes steady. Mordecai's words do not seem to trap her. They awaken her. They gather the hidden pieces of her story into focus. Not all at once, perhaps, but enough. Enough for a yes to begin forming. And maybe tonight, some weary heart needs that picture. Because perhaps you too have stood in the space between safety and obedience. Between what is comfortable and what is right. Between silence and the moment when truth may need to be spoken. If so, Esther's story offers a gentle kind of companionship. It says the trembling does not disqualify courage, that uncertainty does not cancel calling, that you do not need to feel loud and fearless in order to be brave. Sometimes true courage enters quietly, like dawn finding the edge of a room. Then Esther sends back her answer. She tells Mordecai to gather the Jews in Susa and fast for her. She and her young women will fast as well, and then she will go to the king. And if she perishes, she perishes. There is strength in those words, yes, but let us not hear them with harshness. Instead, hear the surrender in them. Hear the stillness. Hear the moment a soul places itself fully into the hands of God. Esther does not respond with frantic schemes. She does not attempt to manufacture control. She begins with fasting, with waiting, with dependence, with making room for God. There is something deeply peaceful in that. In the face of a crisis, she does not first grasp for cleverness, though wisdom will come. She does not first gather weapons, though protection is needed. She begins with a holy pause, a setting aside, a quiet seeking. And the pace of the story itself seems to slow around those 3 days. 3 days of fasting, 3 days of inward preparation, 3 days where no visible resolution has yet arrived, 3 days in which the soul must learn to rest its future in God's care. Can you imagine those days now? The palace still ordered and restrained around Esther, the light changing from morning to evening, servants moving softly through chambers, voices low, curtains drawn, footsteps in halls. And beneath all of it, this deeper silence, a waiting not of emptiness, but of gathering, a sacred inwardness, a heart being steadied. Perhaps Esther prayed with words. Perhaps at times she had no words at all. Perhaps she simply sat with her need before the Lord. Sometimes that is prayer too. Sometimes the deepest prayer is just remaining before God when you cannot yet see the outcome. These 3 days matter because they show us that courage is often formed before it is seen. Long before Esther stands in the doorway, courage has already been growing in the hidden place. Long before anyone in the court witnesses her step, God has been meeting her in the stillness. What others later see as bravery began in secret dependence. That is often true for us as well. The outward moment may appear sudden, but the real work has often been happening beneath the surface for some time. In long nights, in surrendered prayers, in quiet tears, in the slow unclenching of fear, in the repeated choice to trust God one more day. When the third day comes, Esther puts on her royal robes. This image has a quiet beauty to it, not flashy grandeur, but calm and dignified readiness. Soft fabric arranged with care, hands perhaps a little stiller than before, breathing measured, posture lifted. A woman steady, not because she feels no fear, but because she has entrusted her fear to God. Picture this is the visual heart of the story. Light dimming toward evening, columns rising around her, curtain a hush in the air. And Esther standing there, softly lit, before speaking, before knowing, before the moment resolves. She is not performing, she is simply present. It is to stand where obedience has placed you, and to remain there with a heart surrendered to God. The king sees her. He extends the golden scepter. Mercy, the threshold she feared, becomes the threshold through which favor comes. What relief must have moved through her body then? Not noisy relief, not wild reaction, but perhaps a deep inward loosening. The breath she had held released, the first answer given, the first opening made, and perhaps there is comfort here too for the anxious heart. How often do we dread a threshold, only to find that God meets us there more gently than we expected? How often does fear tell us the doorway will undo us, while grace waits just on the other side? This does not mean every hard step is easy. It does not mean there is never cost. But it does mean the Lord can meet us in the exact place we were most afraid to stand. The king asks Esther what she desires, even offering up to half the kingdom. But Esther, in wisdom, does not say everything at once. She invites the king and Haman to a banquet she has prepared. This is such a beautiful part of her courage. She does not confuse urgency with haste. She is brave, but she is not reckless. She has stepped forward, but she does not force the whole matter into speech before the right time. This too is courage, to know not only when to speak, but when to wait, to understand that timing can be part of truthfulness, to trust that patience is not weakness. Many people imagine courage as a burst of action, but Esther shows a quieter kind, a courage that can remain composed, a courage that can move slowly, a courage that does not rush, because it is anchored somewhere deeper than panic. At the first banquet, the king again asks Esther what she wants, and again she waits. Again she invites the king and Haman to another banquet on the following day. This patience may seem surprising, but it is full of wisdom. But it must also be said at the right time. And Esther, who once lived hidden, who learned to listen, who received guidance in the women's house, who fasted before she acted, now carries that same quiet discernment into the center of power. Nothing in her earlier formation is wasted. The hidden years prepared her for the public hour. The gentle habits of listening made space for wise courage. The story. And here we come to one of the most tenderly mysterious moments in all of Esther. The king cannot sleep. Scripture, sleep leaves him. So he orders the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, to be brought and read before him. How quietly astonishing Providence can be. An empire is at stake. A queen is waiting. And in the middle of it all, the turning point begins with a sleepless night and an old record book. No thunder, no vision blazing across the sky, just a restless king. Pages, words read aloud. And there, in the record, the forgotten faithfulness of Mordecai appears again. The plot against the king, the life preserved, the service remembered. What once seemed buried in silence rises at exactly the right hour. Oh, what comfort there is in this for anyone awake in the night, anyone listening now in the dark, unable to sleep easily, anyone whose mind keeps circling, anyone who wonders what God could possibly be doing in these restless hours. The book of Esther suggests that even sleeplessness is not outside his providence. Even the wakeful night can be gathered into his purpose. Even a page turned at the right moment can become part of his care. The king asks, what honor has been given to Mordecai for this act? The answer comes, nothing has yet been done. Nothing yet. There is that delay again, that gap between faithfulness and visible reward, that stretch of silence in which a deed can seem forgotten. And yet now, the delay itself becomes part of the beauty, because honor withheld at one moment becomes honor perfectly timed at another. What looked late was not lost. What seemed overlooked was being kept for a wiser hour. There is a gentle lesson here for tired hearts. Sometimes we ache because the good has not yet appeared, because the answer is late, because justice feels delayed, because the kindness we offered returned no visible fruit, because the labor of years remains unrecognized. And yet there may be moments known only to God in which the timing of remembrance matters as much as remembrance itself. The king, moved by what he hears, determines to honor Mordecai. And through a series of events that can only be described as quietly ironic, Mordecai is lifted publicly in the very place where shame had been intended for him. We do not need to sharpen the contrast too much tonight. It is enough to notice that pride does not hold the final order of things. Human schemes move one way. God's quiet governance moves another. And little by little, the hidden structure of mercy begins to show. Imagine Mordecai being clothed in honor, not because he sought it loudly, not because he demanded to be seen, but because a faithful act, written down and preserved, had reached its appointed hour. Light entering a dim room, morning touching what had been shadowed, a burden beginning at last to shift. This part of the story reminds us that heaven is not careless with forgotten things. God does not misplace the record of goodness. He does not lose the memory of obedience. He does not overlook the tears shed in secret while doing what was right. Nothing entrusted to him is ever beyond his keeping. Take another slow breath, and if your own heart has known some long delay, let the story speak gently to it now. Delay is not always denial. Silence is not absence. The page may not yet have been read aloud, but it has not vanished. The turning may not yet be visible, but God has not misplaced your story. Soon the second banquet arrives. Esther comes again with patience, composure, and courage. The king asks once more for her request. Now the time has ripened. Now waiting gives way to speech, and Esther speaks. She speaks not only for herself, but for her people. Her words are careful, respectful, and brave. There is such tenderness in this moment, because Esther's courage is not for self-importance. It is for protection, for intercession, for the good of others. She uses the place she has been given not to secure comfort alone, but to become a shelter for the vulnerable. This is holy courage, not noisy, not self-exalting, just clear, sacrificial, and timely. The truth comes into the open. The plan that seemed so fixed begins to unravel. Wrongdoing is exposed. Pride begins to collapse under its own weight. And again, we do not need to dwell on the harsher edges of the reversal. For a sleep story, it is enough to say this: what was meant for harm does not have the final word. The dark design does not stand forever. The one who plotted destruction is not the true author of the ending. Instead, the story turns toward relief. Mordecai is brought into new honor and responsibility. The ring, once used to seal danger, is given into wiser hands. Esther continues to plead for her people. Her courage does not end with one brave step. It continues in compassionate perseverance. Letters are written again. New words go out across the empire. The pressure that had tightened around countless hearts begins to loosen. A path opens where before there had seemed to be only dread. This is one of the loveliest movements in Esther's story. Reversal. Not cheap reversal, not instant forgetting of what was frightening, but the slow and real turning of events by the hidden providence of God. A night of threat giving way to a morning of hope. A sealed sorrow answered by a new decree. Fear loosening its grip. Relief spreading outward. Imagine the messengers traveling. Imagine distant places receiving the new letters. Imagine homes where anxiety had sat heavily, now filling with cautious hope. Imagine faces lifting. Imagine breaths released. Imagine the first feeling of safety after tension has lived in the body too long. Some listeners know that feeling. The long strain, the constant alertness, the heart that forgot how to rest because too much felt uncertain for too long. And then, at last, some sign of mercy, some opening, some answer, some room to breathe again. That is part of what Esther offers tonight. Not a promise that life never holds tension. It plainly does. But a reminder that tension is not the end of the story. That God can guide history toward mercy, even when no one in the middle fully understands how. That the very place of danger can become the place where hidden courage serves many. That relief, though delayed, can still come. That peace after pressure can feel like dawn. Scripture says there was light and gladness and joy and honor for the Jews. We can receive that line gently at bedtime. Light after dimness, gladness after sorrow, honor after humiliation, joy after long waiting. The texture of the whole story changes, not because the past never happened, not because the fear was imaginary, but because Providence has turned the page. And perhaps this is one reason the book of Esther remains such a comfort. God is never directly named in it, yet his fingerprints seem everywhere. In an orphaned girl being cared for, in quiet favor from the right person, in a cousin waiting near a gate, in a faithful act written down, in a word of calling spoken at the right time, in 3 days of fasting, in the extension of a golden scepter, in the restraint to wait one more day, in a sleepless night, in an opened book, in a remembered name, in the turning of letters across an empire, in peace after pressure. This is often how Providence feels, not always through blazing intervention, more often through the weaving together of details no one person could have arranged, 1,000 gentle threads crossing where we could not see. And only later, looking back, do we begin to recognize that God was nearer than we knew. Let the story pause here for a moment. Let your breathing become slow and easy again. You do not need to force anything. Just notice the bed beneath you, the support under your body, the quiet around you. And as the story's tension eases, let some of your own ease as well. Release your forehead. Unclench your hands. Let your tongue rest softly. Let your chest loosen. Peace often comes this way. Not all at once, but by gentle degrees. And now, as the story settles, we can linger a little more deeply in what Esther's life has shown us. Her story begins in hiddenness. That matters, because so many people fear hidden seasons. They worry that obscurity means insignificance. They assume that if life is small, or quiet, or ordinary, then perhaps God is not doing very much. But Esther tells another truth. A hidden life may still be a prepared life. A quiet season may still be full of unseen formation. An ordinary day may still stand inside divine wisdom. Before Esther ever stood in royal robes, she was being shaped in quieter clothes. Before she faced the king, she learned to listen in less visible rooms. Before she spoke for many, she had already learned how to receive guidance with grace. Before the public courage, there was private formation. Before the visible purpose, there was hidden faithfulness. How often is that the way of God? He does not always hurry the story. He is not wasteful with obscurity. He does not despise slow preparation. And because of that, perhaps your own hidden season need not frighten you so much. Perhaps the days that seem small are not small to Him. Perhaps the year that feels undefined is not undefined in heaven. Perhaps the waiting itself has holy work in it. Esther also teaches us about quiet courage. Many imagine courage as naturally loud, decisive, public, unshaken. But Esther's courage is softer than that, and perhaps more accessible because it is. She fasts before she speaks. She trembles, perhaps, but still stands where obedience leads her. She uses timing wisely. She does not confuse calmness with weakness. She does not need to roar in order to be brave. This matters for the anxious soul, for the gentle person who feels outmatched by louder personalities, for the weary listener who thinks courage belongs only to those who feel naturally strong. Esther says otherwise. Courage can have a quiet voice. It can arrive with careful steps. It can wear tears and still remain courageous. It can be deeply feminine, deeply tender, deeply composed. It can breathe slowly and still change the course of events. And then there is Mordecai, steady, observant, faithful near the gate. His story, too, is part of the comfort, because he reminds us that small faithfulness matters. His moment of service seems forgotten. Recorded, yes, but not rewarded. And yet that record becomes part of the turning. How many of us need that reminder? The prayer you prayed over a child, the meal you made for someone grieving, the truth you told at personal cost, the years you worked honestly, the patient care no one thanked you for, the hidden obedience, the service offered without applause, the costly choice to remain kind. None of it is wasted. The Lord of Providence is not careless with small faithfulness, and even if its meaning is delayed, it is not lost. Then there is the astonishing quietness of God in the book of Esther. His name is not spoken directly, and still He is there. This is perhaps the deepest tenderness of all, because some nights you may feel that very thing in your own life. No dramatic sign, no fresh certainty, no obvious answer, just the quiet. And you wonder whether God is near in that kind of silence. Esther answers with a whisper, yes. Yes, He can be. He can be near in the unspectacular, near in ordinary duty, near in the waiting room, near in delayed recognition, near in wisdom that takes time, near in the night that will not easily sleep, near in pages turning, near in the person who remains faithful, near in the timing that finally opens, near in the courage that comes after long preparation, near in the reversal you did not know how to hope for anymore. Sometimes His name feels quiet, but His care is not absent. And perhaps this is where the story meets the listener most intimately tonight. You may not see what He is doing. You may not know why your life has taken the shape it has taken. You may not understand the delays. You may not yet see how the threads connect. You may be in a chapter where nothing feels loud except your own worries. And still, the God of Esther remains trustworthy. He is not improvising poorly. He is not surprised by what has surprised you. He is not late because He has forgotten. He is not distant because you cannot trace Him. Providence means that God can be at work in places where His activity is not immediately obvious. It means He can govern details without noise. It means the story may be gentler, slower, and wiser than we first understand. It means you are allowed to rest even before everything makes sense. That may be one of the holiest invitations of all for bedtime, to rest before complete understanding, to sleep before every question is answered, to hand over the unfinished things of your life into wiser hands. Esther could not see the whole story while she was inside it. Mordecai could not know when the record would be read. The Jewish families scattered across the empire could not yet imagine how the page would turn. And still, God was at work, not absent, at work. So perhaps you can let that truth hold you now. There are chapters in life where we live by trust more than by sight, where the clearest thing we can do is simply remain in God's care, where we do not receive the map, but we are given enough grace for the next step, where our role is not to solve the whole mystery, but to be faithful in our part of it. And that is enough. It is enough for Esther to stand, enough for Mordecai to speak, enough for a record to be written, enough for a king to wake, enough for a queen to wait one more day, enough for a new decree to go out, enough for peace to arrive slowly, enough. Let your heart rest there for a while. Enough grace for one step. Enough light for this moment. Enough care for this night. Maybe you have been carrying tension in your body for a long time, always bracing, always anticipating, always rehearsing outcomes. If that is true, then let the later chapters of Esther become a kind of exhale for you. The threat is not forever. The dark intention is not forever. The pressure is not forever. The final word belongs not to the proud plan, but to the hidden providence of God. And peace, after tension, has its own kind of holiness. When the danger lifts, when the heart begins to believe it again, when the body starts to soften, when joy returns carefully, like light through morning curtains. That too is sacred. Esther's story ends this portion not in frantic celebration, but in a sense that relief has come. The burden has shifted. The people are no longer only waiting in fear. There is room to breathe. And as you listen tonight, perhaps the Lord is offering your own heart a little room to breathe, not by answering every question in this instant, but by reminding you that His care can be active even in silence, that He can guide without announcing Himself, that hidden courage matters, that patient wisdom matters, that timing matters, that faithfulness matters, that no part of your life is invisible to Him. Imagine now, one more time, Esther standing behind palace curtains at dusk, the light soft, her posture still, the room hushed. She has not always known what God was doing. She has not moved through her story with perfect clarity. She has known loss. She has known waiting. She has known uncertainty. She has known the weight of a decision. And yet she is held in providence, held in the mystery of a God whose name is quiet in the story, but whose care surrounds it all. Picture that scene slowly growing dimmer now. The palace settling into evening, footsteps fading, lamps lowered, curtains barely moving. The urgency of the story giving way to calm. Mordecai no longer merely waiting near the gate, but honored. The letters of peace having gone out. Homes across the empire breathing easier, the strain loosening. The night no longer full only of dread, but of relief. And somewhere in that wide and quiet world, the faithful God still watches. The same God who watches now over your room, over your breathing, over your thoughts, over the things you have no power to arrange tonight. You do not need to arrange them. You do not need to hold every thread. You do not need to stay awake to prove your care. God's providence does not depend on your sleeplessness. His faithfulness does not increase because you keep rehearsing your fears. The story of Esther gives you permission to rest, to release, to let the hidden hand of God remain hidden if it must, while still believing it is kind. There is such peace in that. You can trust Him without seeing everything. You can sleep without solving everything. You can be held without understanding every detail of how. So let the story become very soft now, very slow, very quiet. Esther's hidden beginning, Mordecai's steady presence, a faithful act recorded, a whisper calling, 3 days of stillness, royal robes at dusk, a doorway crossed, a scepter extended, banquets, wise waiting, a sleepless king, an opened book, a remembered name, letters rewritten, tension easing, peace spreading, and over all of it, the quiet providence of God. If there are unanswered things in your own life tonight, you may place them here. You may lay them down one by one. The conversation you cannot control, the grief that still feels tender, the future that seems misty, the relationship that feels fragile, the responsibility that weighs on you, the prayer that has not yet found its visible answer. You may place them all into the hands of the God who works even when His name seems unspoken. You may trust Him with the chapters you do not understand. You may let tomorrow remain tomorrow. Tonight is for resting. Tonight is for being held. Tonight is for releasing the need to force clarity before sleep. Breathe in gently and breathe out slowly. Again. Breathe in gently and breathe out slowly. Let your bed hold you. Let the night be kind to you. Let God be God while you rest. Perhaps the hidden season will one day make sense. Perhaps the delay will one day show its purpose. Perhaps the page you thought forgotten will be read at exactly the needed moment. Perhaps the courage you think you do not have will meet you when the hour comes. Perhaps the peace you cannot manufacture will arrive as a gift, not an achievement. But for now, you do not need to rush ahead to any of that. You only need to rest in the character of God, the God who keeps watch in quiet stories, the God who remembers, the God who guides, the God who can turn what looked fixed, the God who remains near in silence, the God who held Esther, the God who holds you. The night is deeper now. The story has grown still. Nothing new needs to be added. Nothing more needs to be solved. Just peace. Just quiet. Just the gentle mercy of God over all that remains unfinished. So may your thoughts become lighter now. May your body feel safer. May your breathing become slower. May your heart remember that quiet is not emptiness when God is near. And may the hidden providence that carried Esther's story carry your own life too, in ways you may not yet see, but can still trust. Rest now. Rest beneath the care of God. Rest beneath the wisdom of God. Rest beneath the gentleness of God. Rest beneath the unseen hand that does not forget, does not fail, and does not sleep. And as Esther rested beneath the quiet providence of God, may you also rest tonight, held gently in his unseen care. And as Esther rested beneath the quiet providence of God, may you also rest tonight, held gently in his unseen care.